All right, welcome everyone to the Lead Generation World podcast. My name is Michael Furry, your host today. Thank you for joining us today. We got a great podcast in store for you. We've got Nigel Borwell from LeadTech over there in Leeds, UK. So we're really excited to bring Nigel on. He's got a great thing going, and I think you'll gather that from the conversation we've got in store for you. So hold tight. We'll get started in just a moment. Just want to remind you all, we've got Lead Generation World London taking place April 12th and 13th. We're working towards making that happen, assuming the guidelines and restrictions are lifted by then. If not, we've got some other ideas, and we'll either postpone the physical event and provide some other options for everybody to connect and learn some best practices regarding the lead generation industry. So as we learn more, we'll continue to share it with you. But if you want to find out more on how to be a part or participate in Lead Generation World, please just go to our website, leadgenerationworld.com, fill out the contact form. Would love to have conversations with you and share what we're up to as well. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started and bring Nigel on board. All right, everyone. Welcome to Lead Generation World. I've got my friend Nigel Borwell here from LeadTech. Welcome, Nigel.
Hi there, Michael. Nice to see you again.
Thanks for joining me today. You were mentioning that you got about 6 inches of snow out there. Was that just this evening, or is that over the last couple of days, or what's going on over there?
It started this morning, and yeah, it's quite rare, Mike. It's not rare to obviously snow here, but in terms of settling, I think as I look out, it's about 8-9 inches. So yeah, maybe we'll go out and sort of some snowballs or something later.
Yeah. Now you're in Leeds.
Yes, we are just north of Leeds, just outside the city. Our offices, as you can see here, is just one of the perspectives from our main office. We're adjacent to a river, really nice location there, in an old mill. So yeah, it's really cool.
That's great. Okay, so tell me, you've been according to your LinkedIn, you started LeadTech 20 years ago. So I guess you started junior high school or when you were 15 or something like that.
Yeah, really nice.
How did you go about what was LeadTech 20 years ago? Because I'm sure it's probably maybe a little different than it is today.
Yeah, I mean, it's evolved a little bit. We started out our life as as a marketing, a digital agency, effectively designing and building websites, e-commerce sites, and online marketing around that. And yeah, I mean, to cut a long story short, we were pretty successful doing that, but we fell into lead generation.
Of course, like everyone else.
Yeah, I think so. Around about 2006, 2007, and there was a period of time there where, we were doing some work for a big client at the time, and we ended up building a lead generation system because we got heavily into bespoke development, .NET, things like that. So we built this system. We started to get familiar with lead generation. Performance marketing was quite new at that point. And we were, hey, what is this? It's pretty cool. And I think it was perfect timing. I think it was around that time where, there were a lot of challenges in what we were doing. And, it's very much a lifestyle business. And, it was tough. So we kind of looked at this and thought, hey, it'd be really cool if we could do something like this, or certainly it'd be a nice kind of string to our bow. And yeah, we that's what we did. We started sort of generating some leads. It was as simple as that. We kind of looked at an industry and picked financial services, some specific areas within that, and we started generating some leads, and we knew how to build websites, obviously. So that's what we did, and we had a really good idea of how to market them. And yeah, we started really small and built it from there.
Was there much of a demand for third-party leads, back then in 2006? What was it?
Lucky. I think we got a little bit lucky. We picked a really good kind of product. It was based around pensions, and I think you've got pension annuity over there in the US. It's was a big area, as I remember. And yeah, we picked that, and people approaching retirement, looking to cash in their pensions, or certainly buying annuity at the time. Things have changed a lot over here in the UK, but at that time it was a big kind of aspect, and people were, people that had pensions were expected to buy in use. So that's really the only option that they had. So that was the area we started, and I would say, we went from, a few leads a day to, hundreds of leads a day within months. And I kind of think that's where the look came in, just picking the right products at the right time. And that really accelerated our enthusiasm and demand and appetite to get into lead generation and transition the business at that point.
What was the competition like for you guys back then? Were there a lot of other competitors generating leads, or were you one of the few out there?
Yeah, there's a lot less than there are now. Yeah, there were some competitors, and like you do, we had a look at who was doing what and tried to kind of pick the best bits and, get some ideas and just bring our own ideas to it as well to work out, how we wanted to kind of position our services and put them together. And we just kind of hit on a bit of a winning formula. As I say, we started working with one or two partners at the time, and it was a bit of a sweet spot, as I say, and I think they had huge appetite for as many leads as we could generate. So it really fueled that kind of that growth.
Mhm.
I think there's a great alignment of a lot of things.
So when I was, it makes me think back to a time when I was, it's the solar, the residential solar market for panels on homes, sort of became very popular. I don't know, 8 years ago, sort of here.
Yeah,
And we had a opportunity to start generating leads for clients back then, and we were we were one of the very few that were doing it. So we were able to sort of take over the paid search pages, with different sites, and we're able to generate very, very, very good quality leads for a good price. Over about a 12-month to 24-month period, that all shifted because more and more companies sort of came into the market. Paid search clicks prices went up, became more competitive. Then you had to, of course, make adjustments to how much you were selling the leads for, how many times you were selling them to. Because in here in the United States, you're able to sell. It was generally known and disclosed and very transparent that a lead is going to be sold 3 times. But so that so they started to be sold to a max of 3 times instead of just exclusively. So you saw this shift, and we actually sort of after 3 years, we sort of got pushed out of the market, moved on to something else because it was just too competitive,
yeah,
too expensive for us. We didn't have the capabilities to sort of manage that shift. I have to assume that sort of happened to you guys a little bit, but you guys were more successful in managing the arc or the competition. Is that something that or am I wrong? Is that something you sort of experienced too?
You're absolutely right. I mean, things are changing all the time, aren't they? You've got to keep an
Yeah.
eye on competition, and ultimately the market drives, demand and supply. I think we've been really lucky in what we do. I mean, financial services here in the UK is very broad, and we've kind of very much progressed from just at retirement type products like annuity, naturally, I think, to the kind of wider financial advice space. Wealth management. It's not just pensions, but wealth management, investments, and all those kind of things. And there's a lot to that, and we have kind of built, quite large networks over the years of financial advisors that want to work with us, buy leads and things like that. So, there's quite a lot of depth to what we do, and everything that we try to achieve is to do things really well, obviously, but also make it quite difficult for people to replicate. Because in lead generation, as you know, there are a lot of companies and there are a lot of people that come in and try do something, whether it works or not, and I think there's different levels to it. So yeah, I think we've been pretty successful at kind of doing what we do really well in this space. But yeah, it's not been without its challenges, and there's a lot of change
Yeah.
in this market.
You mentioned doing things right.
Mm.
Is it hard in lead generation to do things right?
it is hard. I think the easiest thing to do is to generate leads, and not worry too much about who you're targeting and the quality of the leads that you're generating, and obviously charge as much as you can for them. And there are companies that still work that way. I mean, I think part of why lead generation has got quite a bad rep is, there are different levels of companies. There are companies that are just in it short term to make a quick buck, and there are companies that are in it sort of long term and want to do it the right way, and there are companies in between. So there's quite a lot to it. For me personally, I think it very much centers around customer experience. I don't want to oversimplify it, but if you can offer a service that customers want, and we've got a couple of customers. Obviously, we've got the end user, and we've got the partners that we work with, the brands that we also refer to them as well. And it's just, we sit in between, and it's just making sure that we can add value at both ends.
Do you think there's a primary focus though on those two? Is it the brand or the consumer that sort of is the primary focus, or maybe there's not? Maybe it's equal. I don't know.
I think you switch a little bit between the two, but in an ideal world, you want to kind of, I guess, getting the right intent from customers, and attracting the right type of customers is really key, because, if you can do that and then match the customers to the partners, then, and the right type of services, then, you're onto a bit of a winner, which is easy to say, certainly easier said than done. But that's the key, I think, is trying to, to make sure you've got the right ways of engaging with the customers, and and just clear strategies to do that. And again, make sure you've got the right type of partners. And I think if you can do that, then the customer's happy, because you're kind of matching them to the right type of service providers or products providers. And then clearly the intent to have a conversation is there as well. I think, I think that's really key.
Yeah. As I look at your, background and I see the office, and I also start to think about culture too, because, I've walked into offices where you can feel the culture is a little bit more about how do we make money and cut corners. And I don't know how that permeates through the office, but I kind of get a sense for how people were talking about their marketing strategies and what they're doing. My guess is LeadTech you guys probably cultivate a certain culture as well, just within the office as well. Does that make sense? I don't know if that's something that's
it does. Absolutely. It's absolutely kind of paramount for us, and I think for any successful business, Mike, as you know. And it is a balance. And I think with lead generation, there's that commercial side, isn't there, where you need to look at the numbers, and you're looking at kind of optimizing the conversion points all the way through the journey. And sometimes that conflicts a little bit with the quality of the lead, and ultimately the profitability side. But it is just getting that balance, and not kind of forgetting that it's kind of the customer and their experience that ultimately starts it off. And if you can get that bit right and get the right kind of commercials in place, then I think, as I say, you're onto a little bit of a winning formula. I kind of make it sound simple, but ultimately they're the things that drive us. And we keep coming back to that, really, that customer experience, and just trying to get that balance around I guess the acquisition costs and all the commercials and things like that.
Yeah. Over the last 15 years when you started Lead Gen, someone asked me the same question. In fact, I get it a lot. But I'm curious to know what you think. I think you have arguably more experience in the industry than I do. What sort of, have you seen a change in maybe Lead Gen over the last 15 years, or has anything really changed? Is it sort of the same?
I think it's one of those questions, isn't it, where I think there's definitely it hasn't, and I think it depends on where you look. I think with the introduction of all this tech, all these great tools and widgets to allow you to understand kind of sort of data and customers, and it's a huge part of our strategy. Is I keep referring back to is the data side is absolutely critical, and I think the smart companies can really kind of excel around lead generation, are on it as far as understanding and analysing data. But yeah, there are companies at the other end of scale that, as I say, they're still doing what they always did. So in that respect, that it hasn't changed too much. And we're just trying to be different, be better, and change the perception. I'm not sure what it's like in some of the other markets, but certainly in financial services, there is a perception of lead generation, and it depends on who you speak to, but it's the same sort of conversations that we have, and we're trying to change that perception. Yeah, and I know you've had a kind of a podcast with Alan. I think it was Alan that introduced us to yourself originally.
Yeah.
And we really like what Alan's trying to do with contact state. And just trying to standardize things within this industry, and just trying to focus on the good things, and trying to kind of get companies to follow some kind of best practice approach. And we're all for that, I think.
Yeah, maybe you just answered it, but I was going to ask you, what would you like to see more specifically change? You talked about best practices, and you talked about quality and that sort of thing. But what would you like to see in this industry? How would you like to see it change?
From my point of view, I'd certainly like to see more transparency in how companies are working, and their processes, and the journeys that they're offering. In terms of the way that they kind of engage with customers, and I guess the messages as well that sit behind them. A little bit more transparency there, and just focusing a little bit more on the customer, and thinking of that side of things. I think so.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that data. I want to focus a little bit on data, because it's not just one-sided, right? I mean, you guys obviously see a lot of data on your side from a marketing perspective, but I suppose it's a little incomplete if you don't know exactly how it's being closed or how it's working on the buy side. How do you sort of work that problem out with your partners and your buyers?
I think the last time we spoke, you talked a little bit about how you're working over in the US, and I think you mentioned, if I'm right, a bit of a transparency gap around data. And I think a number of years now we've been very much focused in on trying to share that data, and understand a little bit about how our partners are performing with our leads. And it's through kind of that sharing of the data that we've seen a lot of success, and our kind of propositions evolved a lot off the back of that. It's understanding, who can handle leads and who works with the leads really well. That's allowed us to understand a little bit more about who we need to be working with and who we shouldn't be working with, for example. So it's informed quite a bit around our strategies. But it's really helped us look at our marketing strategies as well, and again, look at optimizing what works and what doesn't. And again, there's always that balance and that commercial aspect, but by and large, data has been so helpful in allowing us to understand a little bit more about what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, you kind of said something again that about clients sometimes not working, right? And picking and choosing who you partner with. How important, or how do you find, well, it's not how you find, but what clients sort of work well with leads and which ones don't, because as we talked before, there's examples where, you're driving the same marketing, right? You're generating sort of the same thing for a lead, and it may be wildly successful with one company and a complete failure for another, even though generally it's all the same, apples to apples. What's the difference between those two companies in your mind?
Yeah, there's a lot to it, we've found, and it's a mixture of how the companies are set up. So it's the shape and size of the business, and the processes that they have. For example, larger companies, and it's not necessarily size, by the way, but larger companies that are set up to triage kind of customers and handle kind of leads, and they've got teams sending kind of qualified customers through to the next team, and so on. So there's processes there. we find that they're just better at handling the leads and working them, and their experience is better, and I think conversely, if they're not so great at handling the leads, what we find is to blame the leads. So it's really important that we do kind of get that bit right. And we've also played around with some of our propositions as well, where obviously in the financial services space, I mentioned we deal with a lot with financial advisors. That majority of that market are either individual advisors, employed or self-employed, or certainly small firms, and that makes up sort of 80-90% of the market here in the UK. So either we ignore that market or we find different ways of working with them, which is what we've done. And just for example, trying to take some of that burden of handling the leads off them is one strategy that's worked really well. Whether that's just qualified services or appointment setting and things like that. So they can get on with what they do best, and that's speaking to clients and things like that. So that, for example, has worked really well. And that overall gives a better experience and ROI. So they might spend a little bit more kind of paying somebody or us, for example, to work the leads, but ultimately they have a better experience and a better ROI at the end. So it's very much a kind of win-win-win.
Yeah. Are you guys doing that? Are you taking it beyond sort of a data lead? Are you creating appointments for some people? Is that or even calls or whatever other alternative methods versus just sending a data lead over?
Yeah. Again, sort of when I mentioned around differentiation as a business, one of the things we looked at was setting up an inbound team, which naturally expanded into an inbound outbound team. Given what we do, and part of the reason for that again was around the customer. So when we do make those introductions, we can then speak to the end user to check their experience, and that worked really well. And we've been doing that for a number of years now, and that's evolved quite a lot. There are a lot of positive outcomes from that for the business. The customer wins, they feel like we care. Ultimately, we can get some feedback, whether that's a Trustpilot review or something that can then add value for us as a business from a marketing perspective. But also we can share that insight with our partners as well as to how they feel about them. So for example, if they don't get contacted, would you believe, somebody will pay for a lead, but then not contact them, whether they can't or whether they, whether they're just moving on to the next lead, but for any reason the customer's not got that call, then we might pick that up, and that's an interesting one where we can put those back into their business, and I think that's just a great added value service for everybody.
Yeah. I wish I could remember the exact stat. There's a gentleman, a podcast I did. His name was Scott Payne, and he actually SDP Solutions, and he consults for companies here in the U.S. on lead management, and he'll do secret shopping. Right, he'll become a lead and go through the whole process, and he'll provide a plan. He'll do that for people and tell them where their holes are. And I think somewhere around this, of course, don't quote me, about 20 to 30% of some leads don't even get called.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like mind blowing, right? I mean, you're talking about expense. That's a lot of money that doesn't even get called. Now there's reasons, maybe it'll get an email or something, but maybe it gets stuck in a system, or they're just buying too many leads, or, all that sorts of, different things. But it was crazy that, you mentioned that, it does happen. The other thing that I was, as you were talking, I was hearing, and I was thinking about sort of the evolution of lead gen and buyers. And, there's the, and especially with small buyers, because one of the things here is insurance. Insurance is massive here, and you have big companies that have internal call centers that can take leads, and be very effective. But for the most part, it's very fragmented. You have a lot of agents, that are, work out of their home. Maybe they're one or two, maybe they're the husband and wife agents. Maybe maybe they do have a small team of 3 or 4. And that those teams have a really hard time of, being effective with leads because they don't invest in maybe a good CRM or lead management system. They don't invest in the dial, all the things that you maybe need to do. So what, even with mortgage leads too, what I think I saw happen with the evolution was people not being successful with calling out on leads, which is arguably the most challenging part is getting a hold of,
Yeah.
the lead. So, and of course, they come back to you and they tell you your leads are bad, but really the challenge is just maybe the lead management process that they don't have in place to get a hold of somebody effectively. So I saw, the lead gen industry start to go, okay, let's just call it ourselves. We'll call our own leads. And once we get somebody on the phone, then we'll transfer it over to you and we'll charge you more for it, of course, because we went through the whole process of calling it and all that kind of stuff. But I think now, at least over the last 3 or 4 years in the US, calls have been extremely popular. Agents, insurance agents, mortgage, they'll take the calls because then they don't have to worry about the outbound dials and all this sort of
Yeah.
stuff. And,
Yeah.
I've seen more and more lead generation companies just take that on themselves.
Yeah. Is that pretty standard now over in the US?
I wouldn't say it's overcome data leads because that's impossible. There's just so many leads in the marketplace, but it certainly has become more popular. At our conferences, I would say 25% of the content is around calls.
Yeah.
For good reason, right? Because obviously everyone that's buying leads is making phone calls,
Yeah.
but also taking inbound calls and dialers and all this sort of stuff is a very, very big focus. For like I said, obvious reasons. That's probably the most important
Yeah.
single piece in the process is that outbound contact. Whatever that may be, text message,
Absolutely.
call,
Absolutely.
that sort of thing. So I would say it's a big discussion. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the same over here. I think, if we speak to we speak to some of our more longer standing partners and bigger partners, then, there's a bit of a mixture in terms of how they feel about it. And some take a mixture of, leads, qualified leads, but ultimately it comes down to how they're set up. And I don't know if we'll ever see a time where, I think it works on paper, qualifying leads, and it certainly helps some of our partners that aren't great at kind of, as you say, doing the outbound dials and that whole contact piece. But we've got quite a lot of partners that are set up in a way that they won't want us to take the kind of the web leads away from them. They kind of have teams set up to handling them, and
Yeah.
if we were just to switch it to qualified only, I think that might cause some other challenges. So I'll be interested to see where that goes. But I've certainly seen qualified creeping and the appetite for qualified leads creeping more and more.
Yeah. That's an interesting point too, because some companies do really well with one type of lead, or let's just say an inexpensive lead, maybe not co-reg, but something low quality, low intent lead. They do great with because maybe they have the process that works for that.
Yeah.
And then others need a very high intent lead to be remotely successful. They're fine paying more for that lead and it works for them, and then you have some that want to buy the very least inexpensive lead and that works for them. I suppose it's all about the process, but it's interesting to see, companies like completely different work with different types of leads.
And I think that's the great thing about lead generation. There's so much space to move into. And lots of different kind of models can coexist. For us, it's very much around, really knowing who our customers are, and again, that's with the benefit of the experience that we've got to work that out. But then making sure that the kind of our offerings are as relevant as possible.
Why do you think the lead generation process, like for example, a LeadTech generating leads and a buyer, why do you think that sort of relationship is great? Like, why do you think that works? Why do you think lead generation is a great thing? Assuming you think that.
I mean, I do. I genuinely do. I'm passionate about what we do. I think, in terms of where we're currently playing in financial services, there's it's a little bit deeper. There's almost a bit of an emotional connection to it as well. You know, we start to look at financial advice, so the end kind of result. You know, we absolutely believe that, you know, someone's better off by getting financial advice. So I think that really helps. And that's great because it takes it away a little bit from just the lead as a commodity. And I think, well, you know, our partners can sense that, you know, we are in it for the right reason. And I think that sort of stuff really helps the relationship. There's a real common ground there because, you know, financial advisors are passionate about giving advice, for example. And I'm sure there are kind of things that you can attach yourself to regardless of the market in that way. And I think that's really important. But ultimately, businesses need customers. And that's what we intend to provide, you know. And, and there'll always be a need, I would like to think, for lead generation in some guise. I think as a business, it's just being as agile and as sensitive to the changes within the markets you're in, and just adapting and making sure that you're always adding value. That's as a business owner, that's what we look to do.
Yeah. And that adaption is interesting too, because it happens on all different levels, right? Whether it's a specific, you know, campaign that you're running in some channel, whether it's display or paid search or email, whatever it may be, that there's always a ebb and flow of campaign performance. There's, you know, lead buyers, whether they're good. Most of the time, things aren't just autoplay, right? You don't just set it and say, you know, see you later. In all forms of this business.
Yeah.
What, having said, I don't want to lead you too much onto the answer, but I'm curious to know what sort of frustrates you about either being in the lead gen business or the lead gen business in general. Are there things that you go, man, I'm just tired of this?
I,
Or not, or, you know.
Well, I think you know, I think buyers look in and think generating leads is sometimes it's pretty straightforward. But I think we both know, don't we? We might that there's a hell of a lot to generating leads, and I think you alluded to, if you just leave it, it kind of has a tendency to fall over. So you're constantly touching it, managing it, optimizing it. You know, but now I'm hugely passionate about what we do, and I think as long as I'm kind of enjoying what we do, then we'll be doing what we do for a long time. And you know, we're very much trying to take you know, what we're doing well in financial services now, and kind of replicate some of that stuff into other areas within the UK. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything that really frustrates me, if I'm honest with you. I might come back to that one.
No, I love it. I love it because I sense, and I think this is what's great. And I think this is what's great about LeadTech. And this is what I sensed actually in earlier conversations, that you have a sense of positivity and you're very optimistic about things. And I think having that fortitude, that insight to, you know, with positivity and looking in your industry, you focus on the things that are good, right? So focusing on the consumer, focusing on these things. So I think that all builds into each other, and I think that's good. So it's sort of a trick question to some extent, right? Because, you know, there are things that, you know, when I was generating leads and on the sell side or the buy side that, you know, frustrated me too. And part of, you know, always tapping on the thing and making sure it's working got tiresome too, you know, and getting, you know, having people that, buyers that didn't understand the process come to you and tell you that you are a horrible person because you're generating bad leads. You know, that those types of things, you know, got a little tiresome to some extent. And that's why, for the most part, you know, why Lead Generation World tries to focus on content that really helps buyers succeed. You know, because if they can't be successful, no matter how good LeadTech does and how great they focus on consumers, they're still going to fail. They're going to stop buying leads from you. They're going to walk away with a dirty taste in their mouth, and they're going to say lead generation sucks, you know? And so,
Totally
you know, we,
agree.
we we try to focus a little bit on, really trying to get buyers, at our conferences as much as possible, so they can pull back
Yeah,
the curtain a little bit and say, hey, this is actually how things work. This is how Nigel at LeadTech, what the challenges he has. Maybe you can have a little empathy towards the whole situation and work together in partnership. And I think the partnership is what the strength is of
yeah,
Legion. When you can partner with a company that's an expert, you guys are absolute experts in generating leads. There's
yeah.
no mortgage company that can even touch what you do without a lot of money and effort.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to kind of replicate, and that's part of our strategy. It takes years to kind of build some of these things. But totally kind of agree with what you said there, Mike. It is frustrating. And I think how we've dealt with that, and the reason why it's not at the top of my mind is, I think over the years, it has been frustrating for us in terms of, we're the bad guys if leads don't work, when in reality, leads aren't perfect, and it's about managing expectations as well.
Yes.
But ultimately, when you do know that, it's maybe the way they've dealt with the leads. So completely agree. It's really frustrating, and I think it's more about how we've kind of dealt with that over the years and how we've evolved maybe our kind of services. So we've gone through periods where we've really focused on giving information and education around how to handle leads, whether it's contact strategies, and even gone as far as, it's been a little bit of a kind of contentious sort of area, but even talking about how to conduct themselves on the telephone. I think we've just tried everything over the years. Some things have worked and some things haven't, but we've found that we've ended up shaping our propositions, as well as the kind of targeting element of the strategies as well. So we're only probably going for the right type of partners now, but that's been informed again from the experience. So I think all these things considered, we get less of that than we used to do. So it's probably not at the top of my mind, but yeah, it used to be really, really frustrating.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned going into maybe new verticals. How do you sort of decide on what industries to go into? Are they the nearest to what you're sort of doing now, or are they completely in new industries? And how did you decide that?
Yeah, there's a bit of both, to be honest. Financial services is really broad.
Yeah,
So there's an element of kind of developing what we do in that space. There's loads of headroom. But we are very much looking, as I say, at other markets. And it's very much about process, to be honest. It's about, at each stage, what information do we need to make that decision? Almost like a traffic light system to simplify it. If we can get to that one stage and there's a green light, we'll go to another stage.
yeah.
And that will kind of lead us to I guess, a business case that says there's a real opportunity here, and these are the specific opportunities and levers we can pull. This is the space we can move into ultimately.
So what verticals are you guys looking at now? Do you mind sharing, or?
Well, there are a number of areas that we're kind of looking at, and it's kind of very early in
Okay.
in kind of conceptualization. So yeah,
Yeah.
I kind of prefer not to
Yeah.
kind of talk too much about that. But what I will say is, obviously it's exciting. There's a bit of a transformation going on in the business, and just trying to, you know, I guess lean on expertise outside the business a little bit more. Historically, we've tried to do everything internally, and I think that's held us back a little bit. And we've got some great people at LeadTech, and I think it's just looking at where the gaps are and how we can kind of work with people externally to drive into some of these markets as well. These other markets.
Yeah. One of the, I think, I don't know if it's a misconception or maybe it just doesn't apply necessarily across the statement. But one of
Mm,
the things is that, that you can take your process, your lead gen process, and just put it into another vertical and assume it's going to work the same way, right?
yeah,
Build the website, do all the same things. And that, you can just be, if you're successful in one vertical, that you can be successful in another vertical. And I'm not certain that it's that easy. I think there are nuances to different industries and different
yeah,
verticals and what you have to do to make it successful. And then, of course, there's the buyers act differently too, right? And they do all those sorts
yeah,
of things, and costs are different. What is your sort of general thought on that?
I'd agree. I wish it was that simple that you could just replicate what you're doing. What we're doing in the financial advice space is quite complex. And we understand the market really well. And I think it's that level of knowledge that you need. Obviously, you can get it organically over years, but when you're looking to move into new verticals, you need, as I say, go back to that kind of process really, and just looking at, the teams and who are involved in that, getting that information. And without that knowledge, I think you miss really important kind of, as you say, nuances, and it can really cost you if you get it wrong. So that whole decision making around whether to get involved in that market in the first place is just depends on having that information. I think there's some fundamentals in lead generation that you would apply, but you certainly need to think about, as you say, the kind of market, the customers, what the driving forces behind the market, demand, where the demand is, the right approach, and that would differ dependent on, vertical to vertical. Potentially even use different language, so you have to become familiar around how, mechanics, I guess, of, how these markets are set up and etc. So there's a lot to it, and I think the only way to make sense of it is, and to try and standardize it as much as you can, and that's what we've tried to do through a process.
Yeah. I got a couple more questions before I let you go for the evening over there. How did, in financial advice, how did things change for you over this last 12 months? How was it? Did things sort of just stay steady? Did it all just kind of continue to work as normal, or was there an effect from everything going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a challenging 12 months, I think, for every business. And we look back, Michael, and I think we're really pleased with what we see. We've proved to be really resilient in lots of ways, and we've accommodated and changed and adapted, to managing the business in a very challenging kind of climate. In terms of, I guess, how our customers, their behaviours changed, that was a bit of an issue, I think, when this first started back in March last year. We had some initial reactions. I think consumers obviously were panicking. I think whenever you get change to that magnitude, certainly within financial services, it generally results in more people going online, which sounds great, but it isn't, because you get a lot more, potentially tire kickers and people that don't really have intent to take any action. They're just panicking. So you get that initial reaction on one side. And then, of course, with some of our partners, their initial reaction was to want to stop their lead supply because they're not set up to, they're generally set up to have face-to-face calls, and when they can't do that, then clearly there's a bit of an issue. So there's things that we did to try and kind of manage that aspect. We tried to support them, tried to get them in a little bit more in tune with tech, obviously likes of kind of video conference and things like that. So that we tried to support those areas, and I think over kind of a month, 6 weeks, that settled down. If I'm honest with you, it was only a real short-term thing. We're on a third lockdown now here in the UK.
Yeah,
this is more like last March than it has been. And we
are you seeing the same? Are you seeing the same effects because of that, or are people? Is this more okay? We know what to do now.
I think there's a bit of both. We're still seeing that initial kind of reaction, but I think businesses are better set up, to handle it. And I think that's the key thing, really. And you know what, Michael, there's some real positives here, because I think the industry has really wanted to adapt and adopt this technology for a long time, and it's been quite slow. So it's really accelerated a lot of this.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially, the face-to-face, door-to-door, that's hard to scale. I'm sure there's some benefits now with this, having to, do video, even though maybe you lose a little bit, but you certainly get a little bit more efficient, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of makes it a little bit better for us in a way, because obviously, as you say, there's a lot more, potentially an individual with the right kind of attitude and vision can take leads nationally if they really wanted to, as an
Yeah.
example. So I think it changes the kind of landscape a little bit. And certainly it kind of helps us and potentially changes a little bit around our kind of partner selection moving forwards. It opens it up as well.
Yeah, that's great. You make me think. There was a guy I was talking to that was sort of trying to redefine a lead gen process, and
Okay.
because this is always, this is another question. But back to that initial one we talked about, how does lead gen change? Well, from fundamentally, it hasn't changed really at all, right? Technically, it's changed some, but people go to a form, they fill out an inquiry, and then that gets sent to a buyer.
Absolutely.
That hasn't changed. Now calls have been implemented. One gentleman I was talking to was talking about having the video pop up, and getting, instead of a call connection, have it a FaceTime or something to that effect, where there's a video person. I don't know if that works for most consumers, when they're filling, unless they ask for it. But I was just sort of thinking about that idea of how video has been implemented into our society, and video conference is so norm these days, that maybe there is now some opening to include, instead of a call, a video chat with a live agent right then and there, that can take it.
And there are quite a few some technologies out there, which I think you're alluding to, that you can quite easily put that onto your site, and we kind of have sort of looked at this sort of stuff, and it is this balance, isn't it, Michael, between I guess there's a commercial aspect, and it's making sure that we're always being as creative as we can.
Yeah.
And I think within that, it's looking at the customer experience again, which I know when we first started the conversation, I talked about the customer quite a bit, but I think that does drive a lot of this stuff. And if you can put yourself in the consumer's kind of customer's shoes, then it gives you that kind of space to be a little bit more creative. Now, in real terms, does that work in a lead generation kind of journey? That's the question ultimately we have to try and test and answer. But I'm all for trying to do new things and embrace technology, and just trying to enhance that customer journey and experience.
Yeah. I mean, at the time I told this gentleman I didn't think it would work, not because, the tech side of it, but the human nature side of it. There's an intimacy sort of side of it that I think, sometimes leads work because I'm just going to put my phone number and, sometimes, or my email, and they're going to email me or call me. And calls are even sort of difficult because people don't even want to talk to anybody because for whatever reason. So now text messaging seems to be sometimes the way to go to get somebody, because there's no, they're going to see it, and there's no phone call and intimacy level, So with the video, I got to be ready to talk and be face to face with somebody, to see my face, not to have any insecurities or whatever that may be. But who knows? We'll see where we continue to evolve as humans, but with all this.
Completely agree. I think all these things are great, in theory, and I think interaction, interactivity, and that experience. But in reality, if 100 people go to your website, and 10 people used to kind of inquire, and you put the video on, and that reduces to 2, then you've got an issue on, it's trying to get that balance.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of lead generation, isn't it? Versus customer experience, I guess. And we're always trying to find that balance, I think.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's an option, maybe there's some option there for someone to opt into speaking to someone face to face, and maybe that would be beneficial. Who knows? So I guess we need to leave it there. Nigel, how does somebody get a hold of you, find out more about LeadTech, and talk more about what you guys got going on?
Yeah, well, they can obviously give us a ring. You're welcome to share the number. Just ring the office. That'll come through to one of our team, and they will be more than happy to help.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you getting on, spending an hour with me, talking shop and talking a little about lead gen. And I look forward to doing it again, and hopefully seeing you face to face one of these days. We've got the conference in April, but the way things, it's hard to tell whether it's going to be safe to do it. and two, with regulations, whether it's going to happen or not. But we're working towards April. Our fingers are crossed so we can all get together and bring this industry together and talk about these topics. So looking forward to that too.
If that happens, we'll, most certainly we'll be there, and we'll look forward to seeing you face to face. And if not, hopefully we'll get together soon. It's been a pleasure.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, Michael.